Hello everybody, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of RG22 Outdoor Adventures. I want to wish everyone out there a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm really excited. This is my 29th video on this channel, and I want to thank all of my subscribers and viewers out there for all of your support, because without any of you, none of this would be possible. So without further ado, I want to show a video of a lure that I'm making. It is a shad type pattern, and as you can see, I am drawing the basic shape of it and just kind of drawing the outline of the lure, kind of getting a feel of where I want to put the gills, the eye, the diving lip, everything like that. And once I'm finally satisfied with the shape, I actually start drawing this thing with a marker and getting it ready to cut on the bandsaw. Okay, so at this point I'm basically done with the drawing, satisfied with how it looks, and taking it to the bandsaw where I'm going to cut the actual basic shape of the lure out. So once the basic shape is cut out on the bandsaw, as you can see, we take it to the belt sander and the disc sander, and we fine tune the shape of the lure, getting it to the final shape of where we're going to have it before we actually start doing our carving. So here you can see that I'm sanding the basic shape of the lure and getting it down to its final shape before I actually start carving the lure. So after the sanding was done, I measured the diving lip and the location where I wanted to put the diving lip, and then the thickness of the lip, measured with some calipers, and then I marked it all down on the lure body on the blank with a speed square, making sure everything was parallel, and slowly took my time cutting out the diving lip at around a 45 to 50 degree angle, same as the other lure. After that was done, we start drawing our chamfer lines, and you can make those however thick you want, and you can taper. You can also do some tapering. I chose not to on this lure, but you can. But what I did here, I eyeballed some lines, made them parallel to each other, drew them all the way around the lure, and then, as you can see further on down in the slide, I also drew it on the actual flat side of the lure, the body of the lure. And at that point, when that's all done, then we actually start carving the lure, and that is kind of where everything starts coming alive, and where you can start seeing how the lure is going to take shape and everything. And even at this point, you can kind of see that and get a good visualization of how the lure is likely going to look after it's all done and sanded and everything like that. So I think at this point I was nearing the end of the carving. I'm still finishing it up and just making sure everything was even before we actually get to the point where I want to decide where I'm going to put the lead holes and where I want to put the hook hangers. But at this point, it kind of gives me a good idea of how the lure is shaped and where everything's going to go at this point. I have a pretty good idea. So at this point now, I've already finished the carving, and now I've marked where I think my lead hole is going to go. I found the center of gravity on the lure, and I'm marking the lead hole. And then I think at this point, I also marked cut down the very top of the lure, and how I'm going to insert the through wire, which again, as I've stated on other videos, on another video, was that I picked up from watching The Engineered Angler. Drilling holes down the top and then cutting a slot and then inserting the wire down the slot. So here you can see the slot that's been cut, and then I usually draw a line on the body of the lure where I want all the wire to go through and where the hook hangers are going to be, and I usually use that as a measurement, and I'm bending the wire based on that measurement. And basically you do that all the way down the lure, and then you just insert it and epoxy it in and seal it. And as you can see, it's just a matter of fitting the wire, pulling it out, bending it until you get the right shape, and then trying to bend it into the shape of the slot that you cut for the lure. So I did some work off camera. Basically all I did was I just sealed the slot on top that the through wire went through, and then kind of used super glue and baking soda on the top. I've got the lure in the vise right now, and I'm starting to sand it and trying to get the nice curvature around the top of the lure. I'll do the top all the way from the head to the tail, flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. And I use a coarse grit paper like I am right now, and then I just start going finer and finer and finer until it's all nice and smooth and it looks really good before I actually start sealing it. So basically that's all I'm doing here. So after I was done with doing a rough sanding on the vise, I did a lot of really fine work with some really fine grit sandpaper, and really spent a lot of time sanding the body of the lure. At this point, if you remember correctly, on the other lures that I've done, I've taken the drill press and I've drilled a hole straight through, which marks where I want the eyes. And I'm taking a Forstner bit, a 1/2 inch, and making the eye sockets. That's where the glass eyes will go when it's all done. And as you can see, I've already encased the through wire in lead as well. In this juncture, right now, this is what I'm trying to do. I want to seal the lure. What I'm using at this point right now is super glue, a really thin super glue, to seal the body of the lure. Once that's done, I'm going to fit the lip in, get that epoxied in, get the hooks all set up, and then put the lure in the water and see how it balances out. And from there, you fine tune it with either taking lead away or adding more lead to it. So in this slide, I'm fitting the diving lip where I'm going to start drawing it out and getting it all measured. And now I'm just trying to see how everything looks. If it looks even, and if it does, we're good to go. If not, we'll have to do some fine tuning to the slot that the lip goes into. And it looks like here it's all nice and centered. Okay, so I've got the diving lip cut out. I already test fitted with the piece of acrylic that I want to use. It all looks good. It's all nice and straight, right angles. And so what I did was I drew a circle just to kind of measure and see how far visually is that lip going to be. I saw that it was way too long, so I wanted to shorten it up a little bit. Test fit it again, and after the test fitting, draw out the final shape before I cut it out on the bandsaw. And here you can see the final shape taking place with the final measurements, final drawing before I cut it out. So I did a lot of drilling, a lot of testing to make sure the ballast was correct on the lure. It took quite a bit of lead, but I also had to take some lead out. So I did a lot of going back and forth between the test tank and the lead pot and the drill press to get some of this lead out and add some, subtract some. I got to the final stage where I was happy with how the lure was sitting in the water, and at that point, that's where I started taking super glue and some baking soda, filling in the holes, and then sanding it all down so that everything looks nice and smooth before I put my very first coat of epoxy to really seal the wood and to make a really good base for painting. So here's the super glue and baking soda. I do it in stages. I don't put it all in at once and then dump a bunch of super glue. I do a little bit at a time to make sure everything is nice and covered and that the super glue fully saturates the baking soda. And that way I have a really good seal over all that. So this is just a quick look-see on the lure and how it's all turned out. The eye sockets drilled out, the lip glued in, the baking soda and super glue holes all sealed up, the top sealed up, and that's kind of like what the lure is going to look like. So after all the sanding and all the filling and everything like that, making everything nice and smooth, this is where I start putting the really good base for painting. So I'm using a 2-part epoxy. Here I have it measured out. It's a 1-to-1 mixture. You can use a cup and measure it by volume, or you can use the scale and measure it by weight. Either way, as long as you're 1-to-1, you should be fine. And that's how this Aluminite epoxy works. So the epoxy is all mixed. I spent probably 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, somewhere around there, mixing it all together. And this is where I'm actually putting the very first coat of epoxy on the lure. This coat of epoxy, at least in my opinion, really gives a good base for the to make a really nice smooth paint job on the lure. Some people may agree, others may disagree, but this is how I do it, and this is just how I'm going to show it. So we just paint it on, and when you have a nice good coat on there, you put it on your rotisserie, let it rotate for at least maybe between 4 and 8 hours, enough so the epoxy isn't tacky, and then you go ahead and paint it. So after about 4 hours, the epoxy is all dried. I've sanded it with about 320 grit sandpaper, so it's nice and rough, gives something for the paint to adhere to. And here I am painting a nice white base coat on the lure. So this is your base coat. This is kind of what makes all the colors pop, so to speak. Otherwise, if we didn't use white or any other color like that, the lures would be really dulled out trying to paint through the wood. And when I'm painting these lures, I usually try to do multiple really light, thin coats and then dry them in between each one. I think it gives a better finish, better quality finish. And it allows the paint to adhere to it a little bit better too, so you're not painting wet on wet. So the second coat of paint that I'm putting on this lure, I'm trying to imitate a shad, trying to make it look kind of, because those fish are usually, they're pretty silvery. So I'm using a silver metallic ink on this second coat that's going over the white. Now I sometimes wonder if I should use black or not, but if you guys think black would be a better base coat for underneath the silver, maybe to make the silver pop a little bit more, let me know in the comments. But anyways, multiple thin coats of silver, drying in between each coat. That's usually how I do it. And after that's done, we start moving on to we start building from there with each coat of paint. So there's many pictures on Google about with how shad look. There are many different colors, but this is the one I was going to try to imitate. It has a blue back, dark blue back, but unfortunately I didn't really have a dark blue, so I just used what I had. It looks like gold and purple down the sides along with the chrome. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. So I've got another blue ink. Remember all these inks that I'm using you can buy at Hobby Lobby. So this is another blue ink that I'm going to spray on the dorsal side of the lure over the silver. I was hoping that I could do this do a nice light coat, and maybe the silver would show through, but we'll see how it looks. So the blue actually looks pretty darn good on how I did it. Down the sides, shaded it right down the sides, trying to stay up above where the lateral line would be. Then taking another color, this is Wicked Phthalo Green that you can get from Createx. I was going to use this at the head of the lure and then all the way down the back, nice and thin, and then shading that down the sides as well, trying to stay right around the lateral line and just kind of letting it get lighter and lighter as I went down the sides. So I did some more shading down the sides with chartreuse, or fluorescent yellow, and as you can see, it looks really nice. I really like how this is turning out. So I think this is the fourth color on the lure. This is metallic gold ink that I'm going to paint pretty much just below the blue. It shouldn't really obscure the chartreuse. It should actually kind of blend with it, but that's where I'm going to paint it. So we're going to go right along the side, right along the chartreuse, trying to do this ever so light so I can have like a little metallic hue to it before I put on the yellow. So at this point in painting, I'm really happy with how the shading and everything's turned out on the lure. I'm doing the gold. I did one side, now I'm doing the other side. And once all that gold is done and it's nice and dry, that's where I'm going to start using some really light coats of yellow to see if I can make that yellow be a little bit shiny metallic. So it kind of looks like that picture that I showed you earlier. Okay, so after the gold was done, here I'm taking I think it's a Wicked Golden Yellow. I'm using that to paint a stripe going across it. Where you see that yellow stripe on the picture, that's the stripe I'm going for. So I wanted the gold as a base to hopefully the yellow gets a little bit more metallic. That was the goal. Do it on both sides. When that side's done, then I'm going to start going across, and right underneath that yellow, if you look on the picture that was early in a few slides before, there's a nice light purple hue to it underneath the yellow. And so that is the next color that I'm going to be using. So it's a metallic purple color that I'm going to try to do going to do it about the same, little bit less strength than I did in the yellow. And the idea was to kind of try to start strong at the head of the lure and then just fade it out towards the back. So that's what I'm doing on the purple. So I considered the base colors that you see, the blue, the gold, the yellow, the purple, the silver. I put a little bit of red down at the bottom to kind of look like bleeding gills when it's all done. I consider that as my base. So after that, I put another coat of epoxy on, mixed a little bit of glitter with it. I'm going to let that sit for another 4 to 8 hours. And when that's done, we're going to start working on the scales. Okay, so the epoxy is dry, and this is where I'm going to start working on the scales. I have a mesh that I'm using right now. I've got some of those clips, so you get it nice and tight, so that way there's no space in between the body of the lure and the mesh. The next step in this is I'm going to use pearl white metallic paint, and I'm going to paint that over all of this. So what that's going to do, it's going to soften the colors up, and it's going to make it look like there's some scales. It's going to be you'll see the pearl as you turn the lure one way or the other, and it's going to really look like a nice set of scales. And like I said, it's really just going to soften up those really strong colors. And that's just going to set the tone for the gills and everything else. So here's the body of the lure, the scale is unveiled. I have silver, I have that pearl white on the sides, and then I took a transparent black when I had the mesh on, and I just spritzed that transparent black from the nose, from the head of the lure, all the way down to the tail. And I didn't want it to be super strong. I wanted the other colors to show through, so I did it a very light. So that's what the lure looks like with the scales on and everything else. And as you can see, based on how it turns in the light, it has a really nice sparkle to it. So here's the hardest part of the lure for me is doing the gills. Black, transparent black, white. I painted white for the head. Used that template that you see there to paint the white, and then now I'm just kind of painting the gills, and I think these are the best gills I've ever done. And there you can see both sets. I've made my own templates based on the location where I wanted everything. Again, using transparent black to make the outline of where the gill is. So for me, I think painting the gills is probably the hardest part on the lure right now, at least from what I've tried. So I think just over time they're just going to get better and better. From there, when these gills are done, now I want to take very light coats of different metallic paints. There's a metallic green, that wicked phthalo green, my metallic purple, metallic red, all these different colors to kind of make like a mother of pearl kind of color. And that's kind of what I was trying to go for on the head of the fish or this lure. I'm getting better at it. It's coming along. With the same colors that were on the lure itself for the head. The only other change that I did was I have that color changing, that space dust paint. I use that on the head to add some different sheens to it, different colors, to kind of give it that pearl type effect. And then I used it across the back of the lure as well. So still adding more color to the gills, using purple, some purples and some reds and some golds. Like I said, it's all the colors that I used on the body of the lure. I tried to concentrate on that head area to give it a pearl type effect. And this is by far becoming one of my favorite paints to use on these lures, is this color changing, this color varying paint that depending upon how the lure is angled, you have different colors. And I did that on the head, and then I painted some of that on the body as well. And I think it just gives an awesome effect on these lures. And you can see it looks has that mother of pearl type effect based on however it is in the light. Here is the shad dot. So I'm using the stencils that I use for my pupils on the eyes, and I'm using some transparent black and painting the shad dot. You can do that on both sides. Try to make them equal. I would go dark. So because painting those pearl colors on the gills kind of muted the lines out, I went along with some black marker or black paint with the stencils and redid that. Now, I still need to practice on fins with the airbrush. Tried it, couldn't get it. It didn't look good, so I redid it and painted it white, the base white, and then took some skin tone colors and then some yellow, mixed it all together, and used a brush and just painted the fins and used pencil underneath to kind of make the rays. So that's kind of where I am right now. So I still got some more to learn, some more experimentation. So at this point, I've got the eyes painted, glued in, and I think the lure, painting-wise, is done. And so here, I'm just kind of showing it off a little bit on both sides. I've mixed some epoxy. As you can see, there's some glitter in there. And I'm getting it all painted on. And once it's all painted on, it's going to go onto the rotisserie. It's going to sit for another 4 to 8 hours. And I'll put a second coat of final epoxy on there. So that'll be a total of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, probably 4 coats of epoxy on the lure. And then it's off to testing. But unfortunately, we have all hard water. All the lakes and the ponds around here are all iced over. So we've had some pretty cold temperatures. And now that we're at the end of the video, the lure's finished. And I just want to thank everybody for watching. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and then share these videos if you really enjoy them. Share them with your friends. Share them with fellow fishermen. And thank you again. And we will see you on the next video. And we're going to be doing another lure. I just don't know what it's going to be, but we'll see. So again, thank you, and we'll see you again. Bye.